Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I was born and raised in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and currently still live here. The sighting was an hour west from Philadelphia and half an hour away from Valley Forge. I've had two experiences where I've seen things that I cannot explain. I'll start with the most recent. Last year, a friend and I went for a ride to catch up with our friend. It was in March 2020 on a Saturday night, and it just so happened to be the weekend when the quarantine started. We were on Route 422 around midnight, and it was odd because that highway's usually pretty busy on a Saturday night, but that night we saw maybe 3 cars within a 30-minute ride. So we finished visiting our friend and started to make our way back home. It was around 2:30 or 3 a.m. and we were going westbound on Route 422, and again we were pretty much the only car on the road. There's a grass patch that divides the eastbound and westbound highway. We were in the fast lane between the Collegeville and Royersford exit when all of a sudden we passed something to the left of us in the grass. We couldn't see it until we were right up on it and only could catch a glimpse of it for a second. This thing looked like it was on all fours, maybe eating roadkill or something, but unfortunately I could only see it from the waist, hips down. It was much bigger than a deer, and had longer unkempt, straggly orangish reddish fur, kind of like the color of a red fox but a little lighter in color. What really got me was the legs on this thing. It had canine-like legs, but they were huge and muscular. It just had that shape that instantly told me this thing was not something you want to mess with. The legs looked like the drawings I've seen of werewolves or something evil. Something told me that this thing could walk on 2 legs also. After we passed it, I asked my friend who was driving, "Did you see that?"
Yeah.
"What was that?"
I don't know.
Either of us brought it up again during that ride because I think we were just trying to process what the hell we just saw and didn't want to sound crazy. When I got home, I told my boyfriend about it, and he has no idea what kind of animal that lives around here that it could have been. Next time I saw my friend, who had been driving that night, we both agreed that whatever we saw did not fit the description of any animals in the area, and that it was scary looking. He calls it the beast. A couple months later, another friend was leaving my house and heard something across the street making a low guttural growling noise, which scared him straight to his car and out of there. He was an animal control officer for years and says nothing around here would make that noise. Then about a month after that, my boyfriend was taking out the trash. When he got to the front door, he heard something scratching at the door and sniffing loudly. He said it sounded like a pig grunt sound, but obviously it wasn't a pig. This past October, my friend was sitting in his car in my driveway waiting for me to come outside. I noticed his doors were locked when I went to get in the car. He said he heard something that sounded kind of human but didn't know what it was, and it scared him. Once I got in his car, I told him everything I just wrote here, and I ended my story with him saying,
"A few months ago I saw something on Route 422.
And before I could say anything else, he said,
I saw it too.
So I asked what color it was, and he described the exact same fur I saw.
When I saw it, it was running on 2 legs across the highway, and once it saw my car it took off really fast like nothing around here would be able to."
My heart was beating so hard listening to him tell me this because I know he wasn't making it up. I was glad someone else saw this thing. He doesn't know what it was but said it was about 7 or 8 feet tall and looked nefarious. He agreed its legs looked evil. He saw it around the same time of year as me, and it was about the same time of night too. I drive this highway all the time and look for it every time but haven't seen it again. That's about it for that story. I always wonder if any other people saw this thing and what the hell it was.
So this all just happened less than an hour ago, and I'm still freaking out, but here goes nothing. Me and this friend of mine, Mel, not his real name, usually spend our nights together around a campfire or out in the woods doing various things. Tonight we decided to go fishing out of kayaks on a river here in West Michigan. After we got on the water, it was rather peaceful. We could hear foxes and fish coming right up to the boat. We were shooting the shit for maybe 20 minutes before we hit this bend. Mel had brought a friend we'll call Colin. Colin was ahead of us and said he could hear singing. We all stopped our kayaks and listened. Silence for 30 seconds, then all of a sudden we hear this scream. It started high pitch, almost like a bell, and would end in these screams of torture. We hurried our way back to shore not too long after. Now this is the part that still has me all anxiety filled. While we were loading up the kayaks into Mel's truck, we could still hear this screaming. I felt like it kept getting closer. By the time everything was packed up, I heard it again, this time sounding no more than a quarter mile up the road. Mel and I hopped into his truck, Colin in his, and headed home. As we were about to pull off this dirt road onto the main road, I saw on the side of the road this humanoid creature hunched over, thin long gray hair covering its face almost to its knees, and it walked with a strong, and I mean strong, limp. I freaked out and told Mel. He hadn't seen anything, but he felt like all of his energy had left his body and he almost blew the stop sign we were passing. I told my fiancée 2 days ago I felt like I was going to see a creature I couldn't comprehend. And I feel it happened tonight. I'm definitely not sleeping tonight. I'd like to get to the bottom of what I saw.
I work on oil rigs. I have since I was 20 and I am 33 now. In 2007, I was working for NAMAC Drilling. They have since sold out to Patterson and we were drilling in the Haynesville area for natural gas. Anyone who works on rigs knows that the work can take you way off the beaten path from what normal civilization is used to. Some places, you're on ranch roads for an hour before you reach the location, and others you're driving on roads canopied by trees in the backwoods of Louisiana. This happened to me in the latter. We were rigging down after finishing a well, and we were on our last night of the 7-day hitch. About halfway through our 12-hour tour, and we had pretty much finished and were making sure everything was tied down securely for the rig move. We killed the light plants, and the driller let us knock off early. This area was accessible outside Houghton, Louisiana, and the lease was actually on the back of the Barksdale AF base, but we had to leave the way we came in. Driving home at 2 in the morning seemed pretty normal at first, and I made it to the blacktop with no issues. The blacktop was still canopied by trees, and other than the lights from my truck, everything was pitch black. Out of nowhere, still basically in the middle of nowhere, this thing appears almost close enough to get hit on my driver's side. Okay, weird, but even more strange, he was leaning at what I swear was an impossible angle for someone not to tip over. He was stretched, reaching out towards my truck, and what I could see of the face was morbid and twisted. The hairs on the back of my neck raised, and I gasped it to speed back closer to society. It was about a 2-hour drive home, and I felt off for the rest of the trip. More oddly, I was working over on a separate occasion with one of the crews that work when I'm home, and another hand was talking about a very similar, if not identical, experience. I don't know who or what I saw, and the face could have been a blur from relative distance, speed, and the time I actually saw them. But who is out that late and why? If someone broke down, I could see them trying to flag me down, but this didn't seem to be the case here.
My coworker told me about this. She and her boyfriend have recently moved to the country, about an hour away from where we both work in the Shenandoah Valley. Because of the plague, she works from home entirely now, but I'm still on site. We are very close and she has listened to more of my Dogman, Bigfoot babble than anyone else. So, she Skyped me yesterday and told me that she heard a very strange noise outside of her house the other day. Originally, based on the volume and how well it carried into her house, she thought it was a person talking in a normal voice on a cell phone right outside of her front door. Or a neighbor screaming, just based on the volume. But it wasn't shrill or high-pitched. She heard it initially with her work headphones on, then took them off and heard it more clearly. Her little yappy dog was barking, so she picked the dog up and calmed her down, and the noise stopped. Then started again and continued for about 5 seconds, then stopped for good. She grew up in the country. Bear, deer, coyotes, etc. And she said this was a sound she had never heard before, and it freaked her out enough that she called her mom. According to her, it sounded like a dog trying to speak English, but it wasn't English. She said it just didn't sound right, like it was more verbal than any animal she's ever heard. Again, she thought it was a person at first. But then once she really tuned in, she said it was like a huge dog trying to talk and saying the same 3 or 4 words over and over. I explained the thing about the Bigfoot samurai chatter to her, and she said that it was much slower, lower, more menacing, and aggressive than that. She said that whatever it seemed to be saying, I will rip your face off. When I started to get chills was when she said that it didn't sound like it was straining to achieve that volume. She said it sounded almost like throat singing. Now, whenever I hear or read a sighting, I look at the location to see if it's prime habitat for a dogman, Bigfoot, and this is 100% prime cryptid habitat. She lives in the shadow of the Blue Ridge Mountains, between 2 streams, less than 1 mile from the Shenandoah River, backed up to something called the G. Richard Thompson State Wildlife Management Area with 3 ponds within a 5-minute walk. This is a deep bush with everything a large creature would need. In fact, I had done tons of dogman, Bigfoot research, and this was one of the major areas I pinpointed nearby where I might have a decent chance of seeing one, given the geographic similarities to all of the accounts I've read and listened to. I told her I'm going to come out there, especially if she hears it again.
Earlier in 2020, when lockdown was going on, my girlfriend and I were getting bored sitting around. So sometimes during the day or later at night, we would just hop in my car and drive around and chat. Well, one night, around 12:45 to 1 a.m., we were driving this back road by her house that's just trees and forest for miles. The road was empty, and there were no houses, so I had my brights on going around a corner. As soon as the road straightened out, I slammed my brakes and saw an almost pure white creature in the middle of the road. I only caught a glimpse, but it was squatting with really long legs, super long arms, and an incredibly humanoid figure. The posture it had while squatting was very human-like, except its elbows almost touched the pavement. My girlfriend screamed, and within a second of seeing it, it ran on all fours like a blur to a tree by the road, and just jumped into it. The area of the tree it landed in was at least 15 to 20 feet off the ground, and when it jumped I could see it slightly stretch out. I had never heard of a rake before, but I told my best friend this encounter and he showed me the rake. I've driven by that area a lot since then and haven't seen it again since. Anyone else seen something similar? I didn't see any teeth, the head was pretty human-shaped, and its face was pretty long. Blackish sunken eyes, longer nose, and its mouth was closed. It ran away and hid in that tree as if it knew it shouldn't be seen, but it didn't seem animalistic. I'd say at least 6.5 to 7 feet in length. It looked directly at the car before it ran, and it was incredibly thin, almost bony, and yes, its thighs and calves were really long. This occurred in June of 2020. I honestly don't know the road. It's near US 37 and 191st Street in Noblesville, Indiana in Hamilton County at around 12:45 to 1 a.m.
Around 3 a.m. on July 14, 2020, I had my first close cryptid sighting. I'm writing to you and the community to see if anyone else has seen or heard anything the likes of what I saw today. Now I'm a waste hauler, trash man. I start my days very early every day. So the majority of my work day takes place in the wee hours of the day. I live in South Central Pennsylvania and have resided there nearly my whole life. My place of employment is in the college town of Shippensburg. My job sits in the outlying area of Shippensburg. A lot of these areas are surrounded by vast farmlands and open fields. Well, this morning while traveling to the start of my route I turned down one of the many roads surrounded by fields. It was a half-crescent moon, so there was plenty of light to see in the darkness. As I rounded my turn I saw what looked like a cow lying in an open field. But this field had no fences or wire to keep livestock in. And it was only one. I found this very odd as I'm looking at the broad shoulders of what I thought was a cow. So I broke out my high-power mag light to brighten up what I was looking at. When my beam hit this animal, it rose up from the ground in a slow, lumbering, and purposeful action. As it came up on all fours, the creature stood about 5 to 6 feet tall at its shoulder blades. I'm my truck. I'm elevated and I sit about that high from the ground. The creature was about 30 feet from me, and I know if I stood toe-to-toe with it, its head would be taller than I, and I'm 6 foot. Now at this moment the back of this creature is still facing me. It then turned its head into my light and the lens flared off. Its eyes were a yellow-green color. And eyes facing forward. This was a predatory creature. Not a damn cow. At that moment heat and cold wash over my body and I feel real genuine life-threatening fear take over. I don't move. Sitting in the middle of the road knowing I'm low on the pecking order of the food chain at this moment. It continues to measure me for what felt forever, and it suddenly turned its head and tore off faster than I could know. My pathetic guess is about 30 to 40 miles per h as it darted away. And after all this, the only thing I could think was that it was some form of giant hyena. The most terrifying real-life creature I've ever witnessed, and it was gone so fast. It's been on my mind all day and I had to share this experience. I always listen to your show or others and hear about people and their sightings, feeling a way, wishing for my experience. And as of this morning, I really wish I didn't get my turn. Not like that, not feeling so vulnerable. Like it was starting at its next meal. I hope there are others that may have seen or heard of what I saw, that light can be shed on the topic. Especially for my area. I work in that darkness all the time. Now I'm looking over my shoulder.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.